The Citadel Prime gleamed like a jewel against the backdrop of deep space, its crystalline architecture shifting subtly as if breathing. Ambassador Ilara Vance straightened her formal diplomatic attire and took a slow, steadying breath. The enormity of what awaited her beyond those massive doors that seemed to shimmer between states of matter, weighed heavily on her shoulders. Neural stabilizers optimized. Ambassador, came the calm, internal voice of Synapse, the neural implant AI that had become her constant companion since accepting this post. Your cortisol levels are elevated, but within acceptable parameters. Thank you, Vance sub-vocalized, the words never leaving her lips, but clearly received by her artificial assistant. Review our primary objectives again. Secure full membership status for the Sol Federation. Establish favorable trade rights. Maintain dignity in the face of likely skepticism. Vance nodded almost imperceptibly as the massive doors parted. The council chamber beyond was breathtaking, a vast amphitheater with concentric rings of seating that seemed to float in midair. The architecture itself was in constant, subtle motion, shifting color spectrums in response to the emotional undertones of the proceedings. As the human ambassador entered, she could feel the weight of countless alien gazes. The chamber housed over 200 representatives from civilizations spanning the galaxy, some humanoid, others defying categorization. Crystalline entities, swirling clouds of luminous gas contained in transparent fields, multi-limbed beings whose bodies seemed to exist partially in dimensions she couldn't perceive. A low telepathic murmur rippled through the chamber, a background hum that Synapse translated in fragmentary whispers. Primitive species, barely achieved interstellar capability, genetically unmodified, emotional volatility. Vance maintained her composure, her face a mask of diplomatic neutrality as she approached the central podium. The chamber's architectural elements subtly shifted to cooler blues and purples, colors that Synapse interpreted as condescension and detached curiosity. At the elevated dais, Chairperson Kalen regarded her with compound eyes that reflected the light in prismatic patterns. The ancient being's body was an elegant arrangement of articulated limbs and translucent chitin that hummed with bioluminescence. When Kalen spoke, the words formed directly in Vance's mind through the translator protocols. The Galactic Council acknowledges the representative of Sol 3, seeking evaluation for full membership status. The mental voice was melodious, yet laden with gravitas that suggested thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. The assessment phase shall now commence. Vance bowed slightly, the gesture practiced to perfection. The Sol Federation extends its gratitude for this opportunity, esteemed chairperson. A crystalline entity floated forward from one of the higher tiers. Its transparent body refracted light in mathematically perfect patterns, and when it spoke, the words came as precisely modulated thought forms that felt cold and analytical in Vance's mind. I am Representative Xyler of the Theron Crystal Collective. The entity introduced itself. We have reviewed the biological specifications of your species and find several concerning inefficiencies. Holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showcasing human anatomy with clinical precision. Your species maintains separate biological processing units for different functions, Xyler continued, the mental voice tinged with something akin to amusement. Your neural processes are chemical rather than photonic. Your information storage and retrieval systems are prone to degradation within a single lifetime. Your reproductive cycle is wasteful and random. You require external technologies rather than integrated biological solutions. Soft ripples of what could only be interpreted as laughter spread through the chamber. Vance's hands tightened imperceptibly at her sides. Furthermore, Xyler added, your average lifespan is barely a century. How can entities with such fleeting existence accumulate the wisdom necessary for galactic citizenship? Before Vance could respond, another delegate rose, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin that seemed to pulse with internal light. In place of hair, hundreds of fine tentacles cascaded from their scalp, each one constantly in motion as if processing invisible data. I am Lyrana of the Mnemosyne Collective. The being introduced itself. Our concern relates to your species' memory capabilities. New holographic displays appeared, showing human historical texts, digital storage systems, and brain scans. Your species cannot access the experiences of your ancestors directly, Lyrana stated, the telepathic voice resonating with incredulity. You rely on external, corruptible storage mediums. You're recorded. History is fragmented, contradictory, subject to distortion and loss. You repeatedly forget your own past and are doomed to cyclical patterns of behavior. Lyrana gestured elegantly, and the displays showed timelines of human conflicts repeating similar patterns across centuries. You cannot even recall with perfect fidelity events from your own individual lifetimes, the being continued. You forget entire years of your experiences. Your memories are malleable, easily altered by suggestion. How can a species that cannot remember itself be trusted to remember its obligations to the galactic community? More laughter, louder this time, echoed through the chamber. Vance felt a flush of heat in her cheeks, but maintained her diplomatic composure. Synapse, she subvocalized, adjust endocrine balance. Implementing subtle cortisol reduction came the AI's response, followed by the cooling sensation of regulated brain chemistry. The next delegate to step forward resembled a luminous jellyfish floating within a containment field. Its translucent body pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to form and dissolve in complex arrangements. This was HFY of the Signian Mind Collective, a species known for their advanced telepathic abilities and group consciousness. I speak for a unified consciousness of 12 billion individuals, HFY began, the telepathic voice resonating with a chorus-like quality. We have attempted to establish standard telepathic protocols with a human delegation and found the experience disturbing. The displays now showed brain scans and what appeared to be visualizations of thought patterns. The human mind is chaos, HFY declared, a note of disgust evident in the telepathic projection. Each individual is an isolated consciousness, completely cut off from others of their kind. They experience constant internal contradictions, desiring one thing while simultaneously wanting its opposite. Their emotional states fluctuate without apparent cause. Their thoughts lack coherence. They believe things they know to be untrue. They harbor divisive ideologies within the same societies. The chamber's walls momentarily shifted to a disturbed yellowish hue. They cannot even achieve basic mental harmony among themselves, HFY continued. How could they possibly contribute meaningfully to a galactic forum that requires telepathic consensus building? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Vance took a slow sip of water, maintaining her composed exterior while Synapse discreetly regulated her growing frustration. The final delegate to speak was perhaps the most humanoid in appearance, yet unnervingly perfect. Tall and elegant with metallic golden skin and eyes of deep violet, the being moved with fluid grace that suggested vastly enhanced biology. I am Eldrin of the Athelian legacy. The being introduced itself, its mental voice rich and cultured. Our species has maintained continuous civilization for over 50 millennia. Our concern relates to the chaotic nature of human culture and knowledge systems. The displays now showcased a dizzying array of human cultural artifacts, literature, music, art, media, political systems, and scientific theories. We have accessed your species' accessible data archives, Eldrin continued, and found them to be a repository of contradictions and irrationalities. With elegant gestures, Eldrin highlighted specific examples. Your entertainment glorifies violence, while your philosophies condemn it. Your religions propose mutually exclusive cosmologies, yet coexist. Your humor relies on logical incongruities. Your literature celebrates emotional instability. Your information systems are polluted with deliberate falsehoods that your population consumes alongside factual data, often unable to distinguish between them. Eldrin paused, looking directly at Vance with something between pity and disdain. Your cultural archive is a junkyard of irrationality and self-contradiction. Primitive, ephemeral, a species that cannot organize its own knowledge coherently cannot be trusted with the accumulated wisdom of the galaxy. The laughter that followed was undisguised, rippling through the assembly like a wave. The architectural elements of the chamber briefly shifted to vibrant magenta. Synapse interpreted this as the color spectrum of collective amusement and superiority. Vance stood perfectly still, breathing measured and controlled. In her mind, images of Earth flashed, its chaotic beauty, its contradictions, its struggles and triumphs. She recalled the briefings from xenopsychologists and information warfare specialists, theories that had initially seemed far-fetched but now appeared prophetic. Recommended response options available. Synapse communicated privately. Standard diplomatic protocol would suggest acknowledging criticisms while highlighting compensating strengths. Vance mentally reviewed her prepared notes, but felt a growing certainty that she needed to deviate from the script. The criticisms leveled against humanity had struck at something fundamental, something that required addressing directly. "I request the right to respond," Vance said aloud, her voice steady despite the pressure of hundreds of alien gazes. Chairperson Kalen inclined their magnificent head slightly. "The representative of Sol 3 may address the council's concerns." Vance stepped forward, the chamber falling silent as the architectural elements shifted to an attentive amber hue. "Esteemed chairperson, distinguished representatives of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice clear and measured. "I acknowledge the validity of many observations regarding human limitations. Compared to your standards, our biological processes are indeed inefficient. Our memories are fragmented. Our lifespan is brief. Our technology is external rather than integrated." She paused, looking around the chamber at the varied beings watching her with expressions ranging from condescension to curiosity. "But there is something you're missing, something fundamental about humanity that you've misinterpreted as weakness." Vance's tone shifted subtly, becoming more pointed. "You criticize our chaotic minds, our messy data, our contradictory culture, our noise as inferiority." She paused for effect. "We call it the static shield, and it may be our greatest unintentional evolutionary advantage in this galaxy." Absolute silence descended upon the chamber. Shock rippled visibly through the assembly as the architectural elements rapidly shifted toward alarm spectrums, deep reds and pulsing oranges. The telepathic representatives physically recoiled slightly, as if startled by an unexpected sound. "Allow me to explain," Vance continued, as Synapse activated the holographic displays under her control. The displays now showed cascading visualizations of human data generation, internet traffic, social media posts, news cycles, fiction production, scientific papers, contradictory political discourse, all flowing at overwhelming speeds. "Humanity generates more raw data in a single day than some civilizations produce in a century," Vance explained. "Our information ecosystem contains inherent contradictions, emotional layering, misinformation, satire, metaphor, and what we sometimes call signal degradation." The displays shifted to show theoretical models developed by Earth's xenopsychologists. "This chaos, as you call it, makes deep, coherent telepathic scanning of the human collective psyche extremely difficult, energy-intensive, and potentially dangerous to the scanning mind. It functions as white noise or cognitive firewall." The displays now showed simulations, hypothetical advanced AIs or collective minds attempting to fully assimilate unfiltered human data, resulting in logical paradoxes, processing bottlenecks, or what the models termed cognitive alienation in the assimilator. "Our deficiencies shield us," Vance stated simply. "I'm not claiming this as intentional design, merely an emergent property of our rapid, chaotic development. We didn't build walls. our messy house is the wall." As Vance finished speaking, emergency alarms suddenly blared throughout the Citadel. The chamber's architecture flashed urgent crimson as emergency holographic displays activated throughout the space. "Security breach detected," announced an automated system. "Psychic/information warfare attack in progress. Target: Citadel Core Communication and Defense Networks. Source unknown." Panic erupted across the chamber. Delegates from telepathic species clutched their heads in pain or collapsed entirely as their minds came under direct assault. Representatives of highly logical species staggered as their systems were rapidly infiltrated by malicious data worms exploiting rigid protocols. The Citadel's standard defenses seemed ineffective against this invisible threat. Psychic signature indicates possible rogue AI, collective, or the Mind Weavers, gasped a security officer, using the name of a semi-mythical species that existed primarily in rumors. The Council's systems flickered. Translations failed. The architectural elements themselves began to destabilize, shifting randomly through color spectrums as if in pain. Vance observed the chaos with growing alarm, then made an immediate decision. She rapidly exchanged information with Synapse and established contact with a small human diplomatic vessel in orbit. "Chairperson," she called out amid the disorder, "our systems are different, perhaps less efficient, but more resilient to this type of attack. Permission to attempt a countermeasure by directly interfacing with the Citadel core network." Chairperson Kalen, witnessing the failure of established powers' defenses, nodded desperately. "Do what you must, Earthling." The human technicians on their vessel, guided remotely by Synapse/Vance, didn't erect traditional firewalls. Instead, they flooded the compromised Citadel networks with carefully selected streams of chaotic, high-volume, contradictory human data, memes, excerpts from opposing philosophical texts, discordant music, asynchronous news feeds, junk code, layers of encryption working against each other. The effect was immediate and visible. The invading psychic/data worm presence faltered, unable to process the noise. Its targeted attacks became diffused. The coherent structure it needed to operate was drowned in irrationality, like trying to navigate in a storm of nonsense. The attack didn't just stop, it retreated, overwhelmed and fragmented. Gradually, the Citadel system stabilized, although scattered with digital debris from the human countermeasure. A fragile quiet returned to the council chamber. The delegates slowly recovered, looking at Vance, Synapse, implied through Vance's actions, and the now stable, but messy system indicators with a mixture of skepticism, shock, and budding respect. The representative of the telepathic collective, now conscious but trembling, stared at Vance with new awe and perhaps a touch of fear. "The noise," they whispered, "it shielded everything." Chairperson Kalen formally thanked Ambassador Vance and the Soul Federation for their unique but effective intervention. One by one, the representatives who had previously mocked humanity withdrew their criticisms, acknowledging the unexpected strength found in perceived flaws. The logic species representative, the instability inherent in your systems, provided flexibility that we lack. The telepathic representative, we perceive the chaos. We did not understand that it could also be a shield. The culture critic, perhaps. There is a resilience in irrationality we never considered. A vote was called for humanity's full membership. It passed unanimously and immediately. Humanity was accepted, not just as another member, but as possessors of unique defensive capabilities and perspective, though initially alarming. Research collaboration proposals, carefully firewalled, poured in. Vance reflected on the outcome. Humanity hadn't won through conventional strength, but by embracing its inherent messiness. Their greatest defense hadn't been built. It simply was. As Vance left the chamber, another ambassador cautiously approached. "Ambassador Vance, that static shield, is that something you can control?" Vance smiled enigmatically. "Control? We're human. We're still figuring ourselves out. but we learn quickly, implying both potential power and unpredictability inherent in humanity's nature. The galaxy now viewed humans not just as fragile newcomers, but as complex, unpredictable, and surprisingly resilient beings whose noise might save them all someday. The golden-tinged light of Citadel Prime's artificial day cycle bathed the council chamber as Ambassador Ilara Vance stood before the assembled representatives of 200 galactic civilizations. The emergency had passed, but its implications hung heavy in the chamber's atmosphere. The architectural elements had stabilized into a thoughtful azure, reflecting the collective mood. What we have witnessed today, Chairperson Kalen addressed the assembly, their voice resonating directly in the minds of all present, represents both a grave threat and an unexpected revelation. The ancient being's compound eyes shifted toward Vance, their bioluminescence pulsing in a pattern that Synapse interpreted as reluctant acknowledgement. Ambassador Vance, the Soul Federation has demonstrated a defensive capability that none among us anticipated. The Council formally acknowledges your contribution to our collective security. A pause. However, questions remain. Representative Xyler of the Theron Crystal Collective floated forward, their crystalline body now oriented in a configuration that suggested intense focus rather than the earlier condescension. This static shield you describe, Xyler began, mathematical thought forms precise and measured. It cannot be merely accidental. Our preliminary analysis suggests a 0.0000327% probability of such a defensive mechanism evolving without design intelligence. Vance exchanged a barely perceptible glance with Synapse through her mind's interface. The AI subtly adjusted her neurochemical balance to maintain optimal diplomatic presence. The universe often defies probability, Representative Xyler, Vance replied. Humanity has always been a statistical anomaly. We developed in isolation, without the guidance or interference that shaped many council species. Our evolution followed paths determined by environmental pressures and random mutations, not design intelligence. She gestured to the holographic displays still hovering in the chamber's center. What you see as inefficiency, our disconnected consciousnesses, our contradictory thoughts, our messy data structures, emerge from our struggle to survive and understand our world with limited biological hardware. A slight smile crossed her face. We never knew we were building a psychic defense system because we weren't aware of psychic predators. Lyrana of the Mnemosyne Collective stepped forward, their memory processing tendrils now moving with increased agitation. But surely once you achieved technological sophistication, you recognized the pattern? Our preliminary analysis of your cultural data shows fictional speculations about telepathic invasion dating back centuries. Vance nodded. Fiction, another aspect of our chaotic data ecosystem. We imagined countless scenarios, some of which coincidentally approached reality. But imagination is not preparation. She walked slowly around the central podium, gathering her thoughts. Consider how human knowledge evolved, she continued. Unlike many council species, we didn't receive the unified scientific principles that guide galactic civilization. We stumbled through thousands of contradictory theories, religious interpretations, and philosophical frameworks. Our scientific method emerged from endless debate and revision. Our culture embraced paradox and contradiction as inherent to existence. Representative HFY of the Signia Mind Collective had recovered enough to rejoin the discussion. The luminous jellyfish-like being pulsed with patterns that suggested cautious reassessment. The attack pattern we experienced, HFY's telepathic voice projected, still carrying traces of discomfort, attempted to establish coherent psychic linkages across our collective consciousness. When your noise was introduced, these linkages shattered into irreconcilable fragments. Precisely, Vance confirmed. The human mind, and by extension, human culture, resists perfect integration. We maintain our individuality even within collective enterprises. This makes us inefficient in many ways, but also remarkably resilient to certain forms of attack. Chairperson Kalen interjected, their mental voice resonating with the weight of millennia. The question before us is not merely academic. If such attacks can be launched against the Citadel itself, no world in our jurisdiction is safe. The ancient being turned their compound eyes directly to Vance. Ambassador, can the Sol Federation's defensive methodology be adapted to protect Council worlds? Vance took a moment to consider her response, feeling the weight of opportunity and responsibility. This could be the moment that cemented humanity's place in galactic affairs, but the implications were vast and potentially dangerous. Partially, she finally answered. We can develop filtration systems that introduce controlled chaos into vulnerable networks. We can share our cognitive encryption methodologies, which rely on paradox and nonlinear association rather than mathematical complexity. She raised a cautionary hand. But understand this, you cannot simply apply these methods like a technological patch. What protected us today emerged from thousands of years of human cultural evolution. It's embedded in how we think, how we create, how we contradict ourselves. Our messy, fragmented consciousness isn't just a shield. It's who we are. Representative Eldrin of the Athelian legacy, who had earlier criticized human culture so thoroughly, now regarded Vance with newfound interest. You suggest that to adopt your defenses, we would need to embrace inefficiency, contradiction, irrationality? The elegant being's mental voice carried tones of both fascination and horror. Many species would find this deeply disturbing. Yes, Vance acknowledged, just as we find aspects of Council species disturbing. The perfect memory of the Mnemosyne, the crystal logic of the Theron, the merged consciousness of the Signian. These capabilities seem alien to us because they are. She gestured to encompass the entire chamber. Diversity, true diversity, isn't just about different physical forms or evolutionary histories. It's about fundamentally different ways of processing reality. The Council has always prided itself on embracing diversity, but perhaps only within certain parameters of efficiency and coherence. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The chamber's architecture shifted into complex patterns of purple and gold that Synapse couldn't precisely interpret, emotional spectrums beyond human experience. Chairperson Kalen raised an elegant limb, bringing silence back to the chamber. Ambassador, Vance raises profound questions about our assumptions. The attack we face today exposed vulnerabilities we had not considered. Perhaps in our quest for perfection, perfect memory, perfect logic, perfect consensus, we have created perfect targets. The ancient being's compound eyes seemed to look beyond the present moment. This council was established to preserve civilization against existential threats. Today, we were saved by what we perceived as primitive chaos. Kalen's mental voice resonated with formal decision. I propose 2 resolutions. First, that the Sol Federation be granted full membership status, effective immediately. Second, that we establish a joint research initiative to study human cognitive defense methodologies, with appropriate safeguards for all participating species. The vote was swift and unanimous. The chamber's architecture bloomed with colors of ceremonial significance, deep blues and radiant golds. As the formal proceedings concluded, Vance found herself surrounded by representatives eager to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. Proposals for cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and defensive alliances flowed in rapid succession. Synapse worked overtime to catalog and prioritize the diplomatic opportunities. A small delegation approached Vance as she prepared to return to the human vessel. They represented the collective security interests of several mid-tier civilizations. Ambassador, spoke their chosen representative, a being composed of interlocking geometric shapes in constant motion. We have a more practical question. This static shield, could it be weaponized? Vance felt Synapse subtly heighten her alertness. This was dangerous territory. All defenses can be turned to offense, she answered carefully. But the weapon you're asking about isn't something we control, like a fleet or an energy cannon. It's ingrained in our cognition, our culture, our very existence. She chose her next words deliberately. We cannot give you the static shield, because we cannot give you humanity. We can only share aspects of how it works. And even then, the full effect requires the genuine chaos of human thought, not an artificial simulation. The geometric being's components rearranged in what might have been disappointment. Then humanity possesses a strategic advantage that cannot be replicated or stolen, Vance added with a gentle smile. But remember, what protected us today wasn't strength in the conventional sense. It was our messy, contradictory, inefficient nature. There's no strategic advantage in trying to become human. The advantage lies in embracing what makes your own species unique, even the aspects that seem like weaknesses. As the delegates dispersed, Chairperson Kalen approached Vance privately. The ancient being's mental voice was subdued, pitched only for her reception. You understand the implications of today's events, Ambassador. The galaxy will view humanity differently now. Some with respect, others with fear. Some may seek to study you, others to contain you. Vance nodded. We anticipated this possibility, Chairperson. It's why we were reluctant to reveal the full nature of the static shield until circumstances forced our hand. Kalen's compound eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. You did not create this defense, yet you understood its value. You did not plan this demonstration, yet you were prepared to implement it. I find myself wondering what other accidental capabilities humanity might possess. So do we, Chairperson, Vance replied honestly. Our history is filled with discoveries we made while searching for something entirely different. The same chaos that shields us also drives our curiosity. She paused. Sometimes, I think our greatest strength is that we don't fully understand ourselves. A disconcerting thought, Kalen responded, their bioluminescence pulsing in complex patterns. But perhaps a necessary one. The galaxy was growing, predictable. Even this attack, while devastating, followed patterns we should have anticipated. The ancient being's mental voice carried what might have been the equivalent of a sigh. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Vance. I suspect things will be considerably less predictable with humanity's addition. As Vance departed the council chamber, she communicated silently with Synapse. Assessment. Diplomatic objectives achieved beyond projections. The AI responded. Full membership secured. Trade rights implied. Defense collaboration established. Reputation significantly enhanced, though with complex implications. And the risks? Substantial. Revealing the static shield has positioned humanity as both valuable and potentially threatening. Multiple species are already developing research initiatives focused on human cognition. Probability of attempted infiltration or covert study, high. Vance nodded slightly as she walked through the magnificent corridors of Citadel Prime. Other delegates stepped aside respectfully, or perhaps warily, as she passed. Implement Security Protocol Labyrinth, she sub-vocalized, and inform Earth that Phase 1 is complete. The galaxy now sees us. For better or worse, Synapse added. For different, Vance corrected. In a universe of perfect memory and perfect logic, different might be exactly what we needed to be. As the human diplomatic vessel prepared to depart, a final message arrived from Chairperson Kalen. The Council has existed for 12,000 years, Ambassador. We have encountered thousands of species, witnessed the rise and fall of empires, survived conflicts that scarred the galaxy. Yet in all that time, we have rarely been surprised. Today, humanity surprised us. I suspect it will not be the last time. Vance smiled as she composed her reply. Count on it, Chairperson. Unpredictability is what we do best. The vessel detached from Citadel Prime, its engines igniting against the backdrop of stars. Within its hull, Ambassador Alara Vance began drafting her report to Earth's unified government. A report that would forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Not as conquerors, not as technological marvels, but as bearers of chaos in a universe too orderly for its own good. The static shield had protected them today. Tomorrow, perhaps, the galaxy would need to learn the value of a little human noise.